Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live episode of To the Moon, Allison, where we talk about the top and trending works in speculative fiction, romance, science fiction, and fantasy. I am your host, Allison Martine Hubbard, author of works of contemporary romance and speculative fiction. I am so excited to be joined today by multi-award winning author Premee Mohamed, who is here to talk about 75 different projects. Is that right?
I think it's 75. Yeah.
75. That's just this month, I think, because we were just talking before we went live, and I'd like for you to say a little bit about yourself because you are Indo-Caribbean in Canada, writer in residence, award-winning for Aurora, Nebula, World Fantasy, I think. And I don't know how you can remember all those things. So you might just read your own bio for us because I probably botched some of that. And then we'll talk about the books that are coming out just in the next few minutes and maybe some of the stuff you did before. How does that sound?
That sounds really good. And you're right. I actually am going to go to my bio, which actually needs updating anyway. But hi, thank you so much for inviting me onto the show. Yes, I'm a scientist. My background is in science. I'm currently the writer in residence at the Edmonton Public Library downtown. So the big library that looks like a tank. That's the one I'm in. Yes, I have won a handful of awards. I've also been a finalist for some other awards, the Hugo, Ignyte, Locus, British Fantasy, and Crawford Awards.
That's all of them, actually. As far
as it may be all of them.
The speculative genre, there are other awards that you wouldn't be eligible for based on genre, but I think that's all the biggies. Even some of the ones that people are like, I don't even like that one anymore, and you still won it.
Yeah. And I just want to collect all of them, like the EGOT or whatever of speculative fiction, which I don't know. I don't know what ours would be, but yeah, I'm also an assistant editor at Escape Pod, which is a short science fiction venue, and yeah, I also write books. And you're right that I have 175 books releasing this month, and for the rest of 2024, I actually don't think that there's a number that large. So
it's just the infinity loop, and that's fine. And when I was getting dressed today, I don't always dress in costume, but this shirt reminds me of the cover of your novella, Butcher of the Forest, which was the first thing of yours I read. And it was funny because you had something on Instagram today. See, yes, you can't see the colors quite as well and pretend that I have some horrific animals woven in here. I don't, but I would love that. But you had something on Instagram today comparing the two that are coming out soon just to kind of keep them straight for people going, wait, didn't you just have a book come out? This isn't the book I just bought. What's happening here? And this one I described as, I don't remember reading that fairy tale because that trend of fairy tale retellings is hot right now. This is not a fairy tale retelling. This is a fairy tale they forgot to teach us because it felt so freaking authentic and messed up and grim version, not Disneyfied. I don't know if you in the Disney version, but if is it Verlis? Is that my singer name? Varys. If she starts singing, I don't think that's right. But they made Alphabet sing too, and they've made all sorts of people who probably shouldn't sing break into songs. So
they always make the villains sing, and I tend to like the villain songs, but I don't want the villain to sing in this one. And yeah, I keep having to you're right, I keep having to tell people this is not a fairy tale retelling. This just has fairy tale vibes.
Yes. And I feel it could be a fairy tale if it existed a couple hundred years ago. The only thing you missed was you were born way too late. And probably the wrong content, because most of the vibes felt very old Germanic, the ones that came out of the Germanic forest where everything's dark and people don't come out, because that is basically the plot of your book. The forest is dark and people don't come back.
People don't come back. Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out too, because I was trying to go for something more continental rather than British or English or Irish or Celtic or whatever. This is definitely a black forest. This is the forest that people go in, and it's just so big and dangerous and unknown. And of course, the people that live in the valley know that, and the people who invade and come in and conquer, they don't know that, or they don't believe it.
And they don't believe it. They've heard the tales, and they're like, "Is that right? I don't really want to." It
sounds fake. Sounds fake. Unicorns. I think we can just go in and bulldoze Fern Gully too. So yeah,
dude, we showed that to our kids recently, and my kids keep going, "This is just like Avatar." I'm like, "We've told you that. This came first. First of all, yes, we all know Avatar is Pocahontas meets Fern Gully, but everyone's blue. but yeah, they hadn't seen the original stuff first, and I don't know how any of them who can't, like, they can barely sit through a TikTok, and yet they sat through Avatar. I don't understand this, but yeah, like they don't need to do that, and I don't want to see this movie, the movie version of yours, animated, Disneyfied too much, just because I feel like it would lose how horrifically beautiful it is. Because, but that's kind of what Disney likes to do. They're like, let's just polish over all of that stuff.
Except for the Hunchback of Notre Dame, where
it's all good.
Where they kind of left some of the horror in, and I was like, wow, I'm surprised this is a Disney.
The self-flagellation, or
the Hellfire song.
Yeah, that, or the like, nobody loves you and you are ugly song.
Yeah.
I get that one in my head sometimes. I'm like, I should probably not be singing this while I'm doing the dishes.
Yeah.
Not good for my mental health, but
let's not sing this in front of the children.
Yeah, they're like, they have that enough with Rapunzel, where it's like, oh, you're here too. It's like, ooh, that's a bad. I'm not Mother Gothel, okay? Thank you. Although I did read that book recently, Book of Gothel, which was excellent. Also, that Mary McMahon, I've been pronouncing her name wrong too, because she was pronouncing her last name wrong. So lots of us don't know how to pronounce our own names. We were talking beforehand because Premee, no one told her how to pronounce her name for years. So we're still all working on it. It's a work in progress. And I'm going to bungle probably the names of everybody except for the names. I can do Nikki and Johnny, which is Beneath the Rising. Those are names that I'm probably not going to botch. But Siege of Burning Grass, is it Aelfred? Alfred. Okay, I didn't know how many syllables to put in that.
And also, I haven't heard the audio book of that, so I don't know how they're pronouncing it. So however they pronounce it, that's going to be canon. And however I say it in my head cannot possibly be, because I am just the author.
New question. Like no one cares to ask you. I mean, you hope that they would ask those, but I know I talk to certain authors and then I start pronouncing the names just like the narrator did, and they're like, that's not right. I'm like, but your narrator, like, that's not right. I'm like, well, it is now. Sorry.
This is the problem with speculative fiction generally, and just like sometimes keyboard smashing a name and liking it on the page and not knowing how to say it.
And then
although I'd like to tell this story too. So I have a novella called "And What Can We Offer You Tonight?"
Oh, I have that one on audio. I just got it because it just came out now.
When we sold the audio rights, they sent me, the spreadsheet, and we're like, well, how do you say this? How do you say this? How do you say this? And I had used an Italian word in there that I liked and did not know how to say. So they sent it to me, and I was like, I have no idea. Luckily, I was able to go to a friend, and I was like, okay, so help.
I need Italian help.
Can you record a little video or just a voice memo or something, like saying the word and then using it as a sentence and then using it in a sentence in the book? Thank you so much. And she got back to me in like 20 minutes, and I was like, thank you. And the moral of the story is, don't use real words that real Italians will like beat you up for pronouncing wrong.
If you don't know what they are.
If you don't know how to say it, just don't use it.
No, I mean, that's fair, but there are certain cultures who I swear they chose letters that they really want me to get them wrong, and I'm looking mostly at the British Isles and most of the Gaelic names and anything where I'm like, I read it and then my brain goes, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, Siobhan. I don't know how we're getting that from those letters there, but okay. And
like, there's like a B there. There's like an H, and
but we're not supposed to say any of those. Whereas my children all have either Irish Gaelic names or Welsh names, but I picked phonetic ones so that, if people mess them up, it's just because they don't know how to read. Like my middle child's name, people like to turn her into a color because the W, it's Bronwyn, but people say Brownin. I'm like, no, that's just, you can't read. I'm sorry. That one I will not take fault for the fact that you can't put the letters in the order I wrote them, but that's fine. But there are certain ones where, especially depending on what your own background is, like I grew up speaking English and learning Spanish. So I will try to do that to everything, including the cast of Les Miserables, which is like French and Spanish are not the same. I'm like, I don't know how to pronounce this one with a J in it. Nobody knows. It's fine.
It's fine.
But I feel like your names for Siege of Burning Grass, some of them felt Germanic, but that may have been my just making things up going, I don't know what to do with Alfred. Because it was like Alfred, but
it genuinely was just kind of keyboard smashing. Okay. And then for people that I wanted to be associated with certain people, then I would try to sort of spin off the name. So there's
names. You just match the same parts of the keyboard.
Yes, I matched the same parts
of the keyboard. Are on this side.
Yeah,
these are numbers.
Yes, pretty much. And then just go back and like take out all the punctuation and stuff.
Yeah,
it's Yeah, I don't really write a lot of like secondary world stuff. I'm usually using names that I can pronounce at least.
That helps because you're like, then I can at least tell the narrator what to do. So I haven't started reading yet. And what can we offer you tonight? Like I said, I saw it. I'm like, oh, there's a book here, and I want to go ahead and listen to one of them. And I got it, and I'm like, it's not going to be out yet. All right, what else we got? And so that's when I started listening to Beneath the Rising, which is a trilogy. And I think my first thought when I started listening to that, and I had already finished Butcher of the Forest, and I was starting to read Siege of Burning Grass, was how on earth do you get away with being in all of the speculative fiction lanes at the same time, and no one says, okay, Ms. Mohamed, you're going to have to pick a lane here, because you're like, I'm fairy tales, and this is like,
is someone going to ask me to? You know,
no, if they haven't yet, don't tell them.
Not. When and What Can We Offer You Tonight came out, which is basically sci-fi.
Okay, I haven't read it. I've only seen the cover, and it's very pretty. It's got like pinks and
beautiful. I love that cover.
But I don't know.
And actually, that was one of my first covers that came out that wasn't like black and white or black and red. So I was like, oh my God, color. It felt like being in the Wizard of Oz. But someone messaged me and was like, you know, oh, I really liked the book, but I was surprised that it wasn't cosmic horror. And I was like, well, I read other stuff. I don't think I can be pigeonholed just yet after only a couple of books.
But they will.
Yeah, I write lots of stuff, and I have a lot of elements that come into a lot of different books. And I guess that's why I usually say speculative fiction author, because it's a big umbrella.
It is a big umbrella, and I love it. Everything. And Sarah Harvey says it's because Premee is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
So that works. But but I would say generally, and this happens in the industry a lot, is people will say, okay, well, your first thing was in this kind of general realm, like, oh, it's contemporary fantasy, stay over here. And I don't write in one lane either, and I've been waiting to be told this is where you're successful. Follow that. And I've been looking at projects going, how does this relate? If this one sells, would this one sell? Or would they say this is too different than this, that they don't want the same from your brand? And the idea of authors as a brand, to me, I hate it. It makes me
I get bad vibes off that. But yeah, I think part of it is that no one's told me to stay in a lane.
Good.
But also that I have worked with a lot of different editors and different presses.
That helps.
Each of them thinks that they've got the brand, and I'm like, no, I only did one book with you. That's not all of them. You didn't get to work on all of them. Like this year, I've got 5 books coming out with 5 different imprints. So I can't have a brand. One of them is a weird Western. I've never written one of those before.
A Western?
A weird Western with a wild hunt.
Ooh. So I was going to say, I'm trying to think how many books I've read that would fall under weird Western. And the only one I can think of is Josh Malerman's Unbury Carol. I don't know if you've read that.
No, but I think it's a bit like Black Mad Wheel, which is his other book that's sort of.
It's not, though.
It's not a Western, but it's like, I feel like part of it's in a desert. So
it is set in a desert. So I would give desert, but Unbury Carol, it feels like Old West and feels that kind of vibe. Whereas Mad Black Mule, which I'm always Black Mad Wheel, Mad Black. I'm going to say
remember now. Actually,
I don't know what order those words should come in, but that's mostly modern, contemporary.
Yeah, it is modern. Yeah, but and the other reason this is a weird Western is because it's set in the future, not the past. So. Okay.
And Sarah says Laura Ann Gilman has Devil's West. I haven't heard of that one, so you'll have to tell me more about that one later.
Laura Ann Gilman was kind enough to actually blurb this Western. So
so she's apparently the expert on weird Westerns. So I like that as a new genre. I don't know if it's all of us who are the rejects from watching Serenity and Firefly, and we're like, we want Westerns in space, please, thank you. Like we don't want to kind of keep it to the past. We'd like to update it and let like other things.
Why not have a Western in the future? I mean, what do we think like Mad Max Fury Road is?
I don't know. I mean, Dune is kind of there's a lot of sand.
There's a lot of sand.
And worms and spice.
And drugs.
There's definitely drugs. Are there drugs in some of yours? I was going to say you have drugs being delivered by interesting methodology, which that's one of the things that I just loved the most about the Siege of Burning Grass is, like, I was telling my husband just a little bit about it, and I'm like, yeah, so they have bioengineered weapons and just bioengineered everything where animals have other purposes, and it's subtle how you first introduce it and then it becomes more and more obvious. I'm like, oh, literally the word is lizard gun. Okay, I get it.
Yep.
So I'm like, this is amazing.
There's literally shot lizards and they make ammunition. And I don't know. I just threw that in there and I was like, well, if my editor hates it, we can take it out. And my editor was like, this is weird.
This
Weird
is
is
the
good.
best thing ever. Yeah, I wouldn't want you to take that out because that to me was one of the most amazing things about it. And so just as I was reading this one, the first one is, this is the fairy tale I'd never heard of. And this is the World War II story that I've never heard of. That isn't World War II. It just kind of feels a little like World War II, but it's the war to end all wars, which is what I think everyone was told.
Oh, sorry. You seem to have frozen up a little bit.
Oh, I'm here.
No,
do you
we're
see
good.
me?
Sorry. Yeah,
no, it's not. Fairy tale we never heard of, and then this one was it's a war that we never heard of. That it feels kind of like World War II, but it isn't World War II. But it's the war to end all wars. But no war ever ends all wars.
Yeah, and I think, and that's exactly kind of what I was going for. Actually, is World War II did not come out of nowhere. I mean, not just that it came out of World War I, but that the foundations for both of those world wars had been set up for probably literally centuries, since like the 1700s. So in this case, it seems like the cycle of war is never going to end because both sides are just massive assholes. Am I allowed to swear on this?
Yes.
Okay, good. Both sides are not backing down, and both sides have the completely incorrect, psychopathic, sociopathic idea that the purpose of a war is to be won, is to win a war, when, you know, any reasonable person would look at this and be like, this isn't a game, and you shouldn't be trying to win it.
Yeah.
And that too felt very World War II, you know, with the propaganda on both sides, the lies on both sides, the civilians being uncertain as to why this time we're actually fighting, the use of the espionage, the use of small units, you know, and subversion and sedition and treason and resistances. That all felt very World War II-y to me, but I wanted to kind of explore that in a speculative setting because, you know, you write a World War II book, people bring all their baggage about World War II to the book, whereas in a speculative book, you're more in control of the background knowledge. You're more in control of how characters interact and what the context is and what philosophies are being explored and how resistance looks and how propaganda looks. And so I had a friend who told me, you know, if you just took out the made up words and set this in like the Balkans or something, this could win the Man Booker Prize. I'm like, I don't want the Man Booker Prize.
Like that was the wrong prize. Have all the other prizes.
Speculative novel.
I would like a Hugo, not one of those.
I kind of want a Hugo, although I recently learned apparently you're not supposed to ever touch them because the oils in your hands will like corrode the surface and it'll get spots on it. I didn't know that. Haven't we engineered something better than this?
First off, no one's let me anywhere near one, so I wouldn't
know.
Second, they should also then present it to you with little gloves, like little mittens.
Yeah. Like
okay, so that does make sense though, because I played handbells for years, and it bothers me because we always used to have to wear the little white gloves, and some use little black gloves, so that you do, especially because you sometimes have to damp it with your thumb, and you are never supposed to touch them. My child has a group, and none of the choirs play with handbell gloves, and I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you allowed to do that?
Aren't you going to corrode your bell? Like this isn't a euphemism for something. This we actually mean.
Handbells are
don't corrode your bell. See, whereas the Nebula, which is like 16 pounds of lucite, you can get marks all over that, and then you can just wipe them off.
Just wipe it off with a good cloth, like good. And Sarah says, like the Stanley Cup. I don't know.
No one will let me touch the Stanley Cup either.
No one wants me near the Stanley Cup. I don't actually have any desire to touch the Stanley Cup, so I'm probably okay. But it might, I don't know, hold a lot of coffee because it's a really big. It's bigger than my cup.
Yeah,
but I
think it's bigger than my cup, but my cup's pretty big.
Your cup is big. I like that cup. No, but so your book, you're right that you don't want people to be able to instantly just insert it in another war, but there are elements there that they will ultimately still bring that same baggage. And I know for me, just the weekend before I started reading it, we saw a World War II movie called Fury, which Shia LaBeouf's in it. So I'm not really sure how valid the movie was, but it was enjoyable. And the thing about it it was super bloody, but it did feature a young Logan Lerman. And I'm like, you're 12 here. And he didn't want to fight. So that was part of the thing for me, was the resistance character. And you had the resistance character here in the forefront, which I just absolutely loved, as, hey, what do you do when the main character in your war novel doesn't want to fight the war.
Yeah, when he's actually opposed to the war. And I had to mention too, because again, this was in some of the research that I did about the resistance, on the German side, on the Russian side, there were people in pacifist groups who, to the point where if they were like freezing to death in the Russian winter, they wouldn't pick up a military jacket and put it on. Like that was the extent of their belief. And I was like, that is an interesting thing for someone to do during active combat, but I didn't want to focus on the combat. I did want to focus on this pacifist character who's been treated like a monster all his life and is presumed to be kind of the obvious choice to fight a war. And he's like,
this big monster, like,
stop telling me that I am a weapon. So
that
was him. And I loved writing Alfred. I loved making him as complex as possible. You know?
I loved how you handled it, and it was really funny because, again, there were things that you did not right off the bat, so it took longer for me to understand who this was about him, and that because this isn't the forefront of his mind, it isn't until it comes up that it's like, oh, he is someone who's not just large, he is physically, something's not right with him. They didn't necessarily outline he's this or he's that, but he's like 7 feet tall and all this stuff. So on one hand, not only was he seen as a weapon, but they also presumed he was stupid. It's like he's a school teacher, or he was until everything started blowing up, including him. So there's that part of it too. It's like, you kind of have some issues here. But then I was going, okay, so now I'm trying to cast it in my head, but then everybody I'm coming up with, I'm like, is that insulting to think that they would play that role really well? Like, I'm sorry, I think of you as, well, you're a good-looking man. I'm sure but with the right makeup, maybe. I don't know. But I would love to see Dave Bautista do it, just because he's nice and big, but he can also bring the seriousness to it. But that may also just because I saw him in Knock at the Cabin. He's not 7 feet tall, though. He's big. He's not 7 feet tall.
Yeah, I don't know. This is one of the ones where it's like, I haven't, like, what's the word? Fan cast it?
Yeah, dream cast. Like that.
Yeah. I have a mental image of kind of this big shadowy figure for Alfred, but
he's just in the shadows. So you're like,
because I never do say what his facial differences or anything like that, or what his disabilities are, or any of his conditions or whatever. They don't have a name for it. They're just like, you're a big ugly monster.
Yeah.
Whereas Butcher of the Forest might be a little bit easier, even though I am lousy with actor names. But like, there are so many like brilliant, world-weary women actors in their 40s that I think could play Varys. I don't know who they are.
Like, it'll just depend on whose filming schedule works that week, if they're not too busy something else. Because I want someone who's in demand. Okay, so I
want someone who's in demand. I almost got like Rebecca Ferguson or someone like that. I really love Rebecca Ferguson.
I love Rebecca Ferguson.
I just love her. And, she, I think, can do that kind of, God, I am so tired of this shit. Attitude.
But they would have to do a lot to make her look really weary, because I've seen her look kind of weary and she's still really gorgeous.
She's still
so if
really
you're trying to not if you don't want her to be like
put some beautiful black under her eyes or whatever.
Like get less rest.
Throw some dirt on her.
Like, we got to make this a little worse. You don't look like you've suffered enough in this forest.
Okay, what if we have her live in like a medieval village recreation for like 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and then we start filming.
Then you start going,
Yeah,
that might work. That you also would need children as actors.
I have no idea. I don't know any kid actors. And then someone was asking me like, oh, same with the Tyrant. Who would you cast as the Tyrant? I'm like, I don't know, some evil guy.
Just someone generically evil is good.
Just someone generically evil. Do we know anyone generically evil? And then I couldn't think of any names. So I'm like, some guy, I don't know.
Generic dude who plays evil. And there are people who I'm like, you're always a bad guy. Are you actually a bad person? I wonder if they're nice in real life. Do you ever do that when you watch somebody and they only seem to ever play villains and you go, are they actually just...
And then if you ever see them in something not playing a villain, you just get like deeply confused.
Like,
it's like watching The Matrix, like before you end up watching like Priscilla, Queen of the Desert and being like Agent Smith.
Like, I don't know what to do with you. Hugo,
why are you in drag?
I don't understand this.
Why are you a hero?
Well, and I've even had this. Okay, so this has even happened to me with audiobooks where certain narrators I associate with certain characters so strongly that when I listen to them as something else, I'm like, well, I've already decided you're the hero because I love you so much. And then you realize that that's coloring the whole perception. But I've had certain narrators like that. I'm like, but but I loved you in this, so you must not be a bad guy. And then when it turns out that they're not a bad guy, I'm like, see, I knew it, but see, I didn't fall for it, but that was because of the narrator. I'm like, nope, you were too lovable. And they're like, but I was trying to seem like possibly a serial killer or a murderer or possibly even a kidnapper. I'm like, nah, you're nice. I like you. It's fun.
Fall for it.
Yeah. And there are certain actors I feel that way about too, where I'd be like, you can't be a bad guy. Even if you did the wrong thing, you didn't mean it.
You made some poor choices in this movie.
No,
some people died, but you're still a good guy.
Exactly. And you need to make sure that person can't, like, you can't have, oh, now I'm forgetting his last name, Rahul Kohli. You can't have him play the tyrant because I love him and he is always lovable. And I don't care if he's sometimes makes poor choices, but he is always lovable and he can't, no. Besides, I don't think he would be in Germany, probably.
No, I think my mental image of him too is someone like just unpleasantly sort of pale.
Me!
No, you're pleasantly pale. I'm pale. He's the kind of like nasty pale where you're like, you look ill, or you look
sickly. You're like, you need sun.
Unpleasant. So maybe some unknown actor. I don't know. No one's offering to make a movie of it anyway. So
they should though, because I mean the problem with some of these, okay, and I don't think it's a spoiler, but there's certain things to at least for the Siege of Burning Grass, you would have some technological things that you would need a decent budget for some of the effects.
That's true.
Just to make that work. Now, I don't feel like, well, Butcher of the Forest, you got some things happening that are, you could probably use Muppets, but it would probably look better without Muppets. So I'm just saying, probably don't use
Muppets. As an elder millennial who was brought up on like Labyrinth and Muppet movies and Legend and stuff, I would not be averse to Muppets because I think Labyrinth was kind of like a large inspiration for this.
Yeah, no, I think I would. And see, the thing is, when I say Muppets, people are like, yeah, Allison, Muppets. I'm like, no, but really, hear me out.
No, we're not talking like casting animal in there. We're talking like puppets. We're
talking like the things, the land striders in the Dark Crystal, which
like that
nightmares, even though they were nice.
Yeah, or like that, the wall of talking hands and stuff in Labyrinth. Like that. Yeah.
Which way?
Yeah, exactly. That kind of 80s ish.
Yeah, and it makes me sad because so many effects have gotten away from the practical effects when nothing looks better than the practical effects. And I love when we can still do practical effects and say, okay, all the money we were going to do for the computer effects, let's put it into getting a team of people building the sets, creating these things, and actually make them three-dimensional and able to interact. Yeah. But then you also get, Rocket the talking raccoon, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's real. So sometimes the effects really are good enough that I'm going,
well, if they can,
that's really a raccoon. That's a train.
If they're able to blend them together, then we could do great things with like that scene with the fox man who's also a man and a fox.
Yeah, no, he's both, and
he's both.
And I mean, I think you can get. You said Legend. Was there already a unicorn there? You can just borrow.
We can just borrow the unicorn. We can just polish it up a little bit. Probably it hasn't been out of storage for a while. We can just reuse the unicorn.
Yeah, I mean, they ice when they're not using them. Okay, Sarah wants to know if Jeremy Irons is still working. Are you saying for the Tyrant he's not sickly enough?
We could put some white foundation on him and give him a black wig. Okay.
That's fair. And then I don't know. So Beneath the Rising is the one that I am still listening to in the first one, but that's a trilogy. And that one you probably could get away with, I don't know, just borrow whoever's done with Percy Jackson because it's youngish kids. So I just say borrow them over. I don't think
because at the start of the first book, Johnny is 17, Nick is 18. So you just need like some oldish looking teenagers or some youngish looking 20-somethings to get around the child labor laws, and then you should be good.
I tried to explain that to my kids. I'm like, that's why they use twins. What? And I talked to them. Okay, so Wanda from WandaVision, her sister, because they're like, I don't understand any of this. I'm like, it's fine.
And also, it's kind of a long story, and it starts back in like the 80s. So
yeah, there is all that because you need to have the younger version of them, and it's one of those books that I'm like, okay, so I'm reading this, and it's all timeline, but just barely because you start with some basic facts about.
Oh, wait till you get to the second book.
Oh dear, I haven't gotten to the second book. I have like an hour left of this one yet. It's like I can't catch up when I'm like, you've written 800 books and you're only an elder millennial. So
I'm an elder millennial.
That puts you at least a little bit younger than me because I am Oregon Trail Gen, but I'm still technically Gen X, but just like barely.
But like, are you on like the 1 year side of the divide or whatever?
Like 2, I think, because
Okay.
I don't know where the line is, but I'm 78, so it's that,
okay,
that
81.
barely line. And yeah, we're the latchkey kids and the Oregon Trail, where since my mom was a substitute teacher, she died of dysentery quite a lot in that game. They would always plug her in. So I'm like, oh, Mom.
Yeah, we didn't get to die of dysentery as much as we wanted, because we actually were only allowed to play Oregon Trail after we had finished, what was it called? It was either Reader Rabbit or Typer Rabbit, because they started teaching us to type in like grade 3. So if you worked on typing Rabbit for like half an hour, then you could play Oregon Trail for like 15 minutes.
That's fair. Well, and I was to say, did you grow up in Canada?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if they'd even let you have that, because there's like, no, that's American propaganda. You don't want that.
Yeah, I don't think we had a Canadian version, but yeah, like people are like, "Wow, you're a very fast typist." I'm like, I was 7 when they started teaching us how to type, and they bribed us with Oregon Trail.
No, I mean, that's actually probably a good thing, and maybe I should be bribing my kids, because one of mine is still like doing this, because she's used to being on a flat keyboard, just you know, pulling up the numbers and swiping. I'm like, no, you can't swipe. Swiper, stop swiping. They don't watch it. But that's not something that they can really manage yet. And I'm like, you need to do that. But I want them to learn while they're still possibly wanting to learn. I learned in high school on an actual typewriter. So I'm like super old in that, having to do, I'm like, correction tape. And my kids are like, what is correction tape? And they only recently learned what whiteout is, because they're like,
oh my God.
I don't understand.
Yeah.
Well, and again, having to like put the thing through and strike it through, and it's an art that they hopefully will never have to learn. But yeah, those are different things. And so you would have to have for Beneath the Rising, you need to have the younger siblings. So if you have like an Olsen situation where you have younger sisters, that would work. Maybe some Culkins running around, Fannings, but they're all too old now. So
they're all too old. We need a new child star dynasty. There might be one out there. I don't know about it. I feel like I haven't recently seen a lot of like recent-ish movies that have kids in them, and then if they do have kids in them, I don't know the kids' names.
Well, yeah, I feel like there aren't the breakout stars like the Haley Joel Osments anymore. Yeah. Mostly because I think hopefully parents learned not to do that to their children. But again, you never know. And I think the last times I've seen children have been in Mike Flanagan properties where they've got like little kids playing ghostly little things.
I feel like it's probably different on TV. I bet it's different on TV because I don't watch TV either. I don't have cable and I don't watch a lot of streaming. And you may have figured out this is because I'm constantly on deadline. So I don't know where you'd have time to watch anything. I can't watch anything. Or sometimes if I'm doing like edits or something, I'll have something I've watched before in the other monitor, but that's the best I can do. I can't watch new stuff. I don't have nothing new, no novelty. Not until I hand everything in that I'm supposed to be handing in.
Well, okay, so the first one that's coming out right now, we've got Butcher of the Forest, which is actually a novella. So if anybody's like, I don't have time to read a whole book, go read that, because it's a novella. It's not, you could probably read it in a sitting if you sit still for long enough. And then Siege of Burning Grass is in March. And then you have more stuff coming out. Now, are those also ones, when does the Weird Western come out? Is that next?
I'm not sure. We're still working on the cover for that. I did just get blurbs though, so literally might be the next couple of months. That'll be with Absinthe Books, which is out of PS Publishing. And so I'm not sure when that's coming out. That one's called The Rider, the Ride, the Rich Man's Wife. Okay. It's kind of got a rhythm to it, like a skipping song.
No, I like it. And well, so you say that, and that makes me have to go back to the Siege of Burning Grass, because you do some gorgeous things in there with your world building by way, not just of physical world building, but the theological and philosophical world building about who believes in what gods and what gods other people might believe in or don't believe in anymore, or say they believe in, but the government got rid of, and what secret things are still happening. And then certain things that call and response that you have in there, and how that call and response, you can't say that because that will give you away as being from this background.
I really like
that from. I love that. I didn't know if it was inspired by something or just some idea. They're like, oh, I should do this.
Yeah, no, I can't remember where I got that idea from. It was definitely from a history book, but what they were talking about was not people verbally doing it. They were talking about runes, I think. So runes, so a specific rune and as a call, and then a response to the specific rune, kind of to say, that you had been by and that you were from the same tribe. So the theory, I think, from that book was If that was happening with writing, then it probably was also happening orally, and was just kind of a way for in-group people to recognize that you're in group. And if someone came from out group and you wanted to bring them in, you would teach them the call and the response the way kids would kind of absorb it naturally. And if they showed up and they didn't know it and they didn't want to learn it, well, maybe you guys couldn't get along. But like, here I thought it would also be useful for like the, you know, because it is a war book, but it's also a spy book. So I thought it would be useful for the spy stuff as well. You know, kind of the, like a call phrase almost, like use this so we know that you are in group. Like this is the rune we recognize. You didn't use one we recognize,
or you spoke it and you're like, oh dear, okay, that person is,
or like
not knowing
someone, like you wrote the rune, but somebody told you the wrong rune. So now we've got another problem, you know, like
well, and so the other character, that's the other primary character who's sort of like Alfred. Okay, say his name.
In my head, I had it as Kujur.
Okay, because it's it's QHU. So I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. So I'm like, breaks all the rules I've learned for any language. So I didn't know if it was a Ku or Q.
Yeah, I've been in my head. I've been using it as like a hard K. So like
hard K. That works. Like a Kardashian. It's fine.
Yeah.
And then so he's kind of the counterpoint. So all the things that we love about Alfred, he's like. And then I'm the opposite. But we gotta be odd couple here working together, except not really. And I'm gonna sleep on your crutches so you can't leave without me. Like that's the thing.
Yeah. Like he's not just a generic asshole, he's also a specifically very ableist one.
I feel like I know this asshole.
Yeah, and I feel like I've dated this asshole. And like we broke up because he was like that to everybody.
Dude.
Like he would see a commercial for, and okay, this will age me, but you know, he would see like those Gap khaki commercials. And you know, he'd be like, oh Jesus, why do they have a fat girl in there? Like, okay, well,
they should be naked.
And fat girls exist, and you know, we may want to buy khakis from the Gap.
Might, possibly.
And also, like, why would you just say that? It's just a commercial. But that was, you know, he had to express his personality every chance he got. Like, I just,
I'm glad that he's a past tense person.
That didn't last very long. That didn't last very long.
Well, and I feel like it's at least nice, and somebody who is so overt with that, they don't hide who they are. So at least you can go, I'm going to make an informed choice.
Walk away. I'm leaving. And you know, just I think of that piece of advice that we're constantly told, which is that when people tell you who they are, believe them. Believe them. And that, you know, there's Alfred thinking, yes, but people can change. I can change. I've seen people change, and Kujur is there like, well, I'm not fucking changing.
I don't want to change.
I don't want to change. Yeah. And that's kind of another thing I wanted to express about like some of the reading that I've been doing before and during writing the book is the presence of fanatics, not religious fanatics, but like military fanatics, and how often they appear in the literature as something else. You know, as people who are claimed to be heroes, or people who screwed up an operation because they couldn't wait, or people who went over their commanding officers' heads because they were so gung-ho to get at the enemy, or people who turned out to be secret serial killers or secret torturers or something like that. And you're like, fanaticism, that is the word we are looking for.
Yeah, that's a thing.
That's a thing. And I can't believe how many different accounts from different conflicts and different countries I am reading about. How is this possible?
It's very universal. Let's put it that way, which is why it applies so well in your book, which is set in a war that doesn't exist on a place in places that aren't here, aren't now, but feel like I've lived through this, I've seen this, except I don't remember having wasps that can regrow limbs. That part's new.
Yeah, weird.
So like that part made me go,
Yeah. And I also liked the, you know, and again, I was waiting for my editor to take this out, but the nameless doctor, he doesn't have a name because he sold his name. Because he had a very fancy, expensive family name. And it turns out in this world, you can just sell them if you need the money. So he did that.
Yeah, and there was a thing about names, and then later there are people who they encounter who are like, we all go by these symbols instead of like
the animal names.
Which personally, I love that because it's a lot easier for me to remember animals than it is for me to remember more people's names. However, half of those names of animals, I'm like, I don't know what one of those is.
They're not real animals.
Some of them are. Some of them are.
They're made up. Some of them are. Yeah.
Like rattlers.
But, yeah, it is a secondary world. So I was just allowed to kind of go wild. Yeah, I do what I want. And my editor was like, no, I love it. I was like, thank you, Dave.
Thank you for letting me do this, because
thank you for letting me do this. Yeah, he actually I appreciated him, because this is like that would have been like the 5th book that we had worked on together. So by that point, an editor is very much like, I know what you're getting at, and if you're doing something that I'm about to make a comment on, because it's you get a little more leeway, and I know that you put that in there on purpose. You didn't do that by accident, and later on you're going to explain it. And then
it'll
get a comment saying, aha, I knew you were going to.
Like, this makes sense at this point now.
Yeah. So the book was lightly but thoughtfully edited, and I really appreciate that. Like, he did not try to knock any of the weirdness out of it, any of the, the inappropriate things that people say, or any of the, any of the real fanaticism, or the gore, or anything like that. And, I was trying to keep it away from like battle scenes on the front, because that's not really what the book is about. It's about ending the war.
Exactly.
So we know the war is going on. We don't have to go down there and have 50 pages of like battle. We just
no. And honestly, those things are hard to follow. And I thought I was actually going to comment that you handled things as far as the physicality at times of conflict, because there aren't battle scenes, but there are things that happen where there's physical description necessary. Talk about explosions that are happening or whatever's going on, and you handle that very, very well, including the fact that there's disorientation and that whole feeling of, okay, why does it feel like that's so far away when I can see it's right there, because of the inability to get where you're going because of everything happening, and then also showing how your characters are through that. Even the thought of, I kind of hope that guy dies. Would it be wrong if I hope that guy dies? Yeah. I shouldn't be thinking I should. Okay, but maybe it would be better for me if that guy just died.
Oh, he didn't die. All right. In certain fictional narratives, if some people do die because they're terrible.
But not even me thinking that, but your character thinking.
Yeah.
If that guy dies. Oh, too bad.
Too bad. Yeah, I really felt like I was working hard to get into Alifret's head as our point of view character,
and it worked
for that. So the world is very much filtered through how he's seeing things, and so part of the book is kind of that filter breaking down a little bit as he goes along, and like people chipping off pieces of the filter, and he's like, oh man, this is all stuff I wish I hadn't seen. I wish I wasn't looking at any of this very clearly.
Wish I did. Well, and having to have, because then there are points then where those views are held up to him and going, is this the world you want to live in? Because if you take this to the extreme, like the idea of, if I just killed this person when I could have back then, what could I have saved? But if I'm nonviolent, then I can't do that, including here, because they extrapolate it out, then which are the just killings and which aren't. And that kind of view of the extreme has problems, because then you have to take it to that limit. But Premee, you are amazing. We are a little over 40 minutes, and I want to be respectful of your time, because you have like 87 books you're writing like right now.
I also have like 13 meetings this week.
and it's crazy with all these things coming out. But I'm so glad you were able to join us today and to talk about several of these books and be listening. Look for Premee's books on audio and as they're coming out, but you can't go to just like one place. So do you see where it's scrolling below? Her website has all this. She's going to update it, but you can see the line, like the list of books. Just pull a few of them, and if you aren't sure which one to start with, message me and I'll tell you a little bit about the ones I've at least read. Don't bother Premee. She's got a lot going on. Just review her books.
No, bother me. I like attention.
Oh, okay. Then bother her. Special shout out to my friend CJ, who introduced us, so that she's like, you need to go. Thank you, CJ. And I don't know if I should say Listo or Subco, because she goes by like certain work names and certain professional writing names, but she is also an author who is amazing. So everybody, thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching this on the replay, thank you. Say hi. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the Vox Vomitus channel, and we will be back next week on Vox Vomitus, I think with Amina Akhtar, but I'm not entirely sure, because we just got more things thrown at us and I'm like, I can't keep up. You know how that is. Thank you, Premee.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was so fun.
Say bye.
Bye.